Where is Aaron right now?
Aaron here as always. Happy Saturday everyone and welcome back to the channel. I have an update for you today in the Baxter versus Scientology case. This is the same case I discussed on Monday where I posted a video on Monday saying that the judge in this case issued a summons for David Miscavige to personally appear after the plaintiff's attorneys proved to the court that Miscavige has been intentionally evading service. This is the same case as that one. So the quick update for any new viewers, there are 3 former Scientologists, former Sea Org members, all Australian, who filed suit against David Miscavige and 5 different Scientology organizations in April of this year, alleging that they had all been trafficked for labor on Scientology's cruise ship called the Freewinds. Each of the 3 plaintiffs were raised in Scientology and were sent to Scientology's Freewinds ship as minors for labor, as official laborers, staff members, Sea Org members of Scientology. Now, one of the first hurdles all civil lawsuits brought by former Scientologists have to clear is the fact that Scientologists all sign contracts signing away their rights to ever sue Scientology for any reason ever. At least that's what Scientology would like you in the courts to believe, that that's what these documents mean. So Scientology's response to this suit was not to respond to any of the facts of the case or to address any of the allegations. The response was to go, hold up. Not only does the Freewinds ship operate in international waters outside of the jurisdiction of the US, but even though these 3 came to the Freewinds as minors, they're not even allowed to sue us because of these documents that they signed. And the update is that this week, all 3 defendants submitted their responses to Scientology's accusation that they have all already signed away their rights to ever sue Scientology. Let me share with you what was reported on the Underground Bunker blog. It says, the plaintiffs have responded, saying there was no valid arbitration agreement because the documents Scientology has presented are conflicting and were signed under duress, because they would unlawfully require the plaintiffs to give up their rights, because the plaintiffs would be forced into an ecclesiastical proceeding in a church they are no longer members of, and because the agreements are unconscionable. Now, I had a wrong idea of what unconscionable meant. I thought it meant like inhumane or something. It actually means not right or reasonable or unreasonably excessive. And while I certainly agree that these arbitration agreements are unconscionable, unreasonable, and excessive, there are already many court decisions on the books saying that it does not really matter if that is the case. So I am a little concerned that this is the basis upon which the plaintiffs have responded, but let's keep going and see what else this says. As to no longer being Scientologists, the plaintiffs cite the recent Bixler decision and acknowledge the California Appeals Court was only looking at allegations of harm that occurred after they had left the church. The plaintiffs assert that the ruling should still apply here. This, to me, in my personal, humble, and unprofessional opinion, is hugely problematic. The TLDR on the Bixler decision is that Bixler refers to Chrissy Bixler, one of Danny Masterson's victims, for which Danny is facing a criminal trial starting on October 11th. There's a number of victims in the Danny Masterson case who have filed civil suit against, separate from the criminal suit, the criminal case, against Danny and Scientology for all of the harassment they've been subjected to since coming forward with the claims against Danny Masterson. Now, just like the Australian plaintiffs here are having to clear the hurdle of these documents that they signed, these arbitration agreements, the plaintiffs in the civil suit against Masterson and Scientology had to clear the same hurdle. And those plaintiffs came back and said, hold on. We are suing for things that occurred to us by Scientology after we left Scientology. And in that case, the court did rule that the arbitration agreements did not apply, were not binding, and those former Scientologists were allowed to sue, again, because they weren't suing for things that happened when they were still in Scientology and these agreements would have been in effect. It really concerns me that the plaintiffs in the Bixler case are saying that, or their attorneys, yes, we understand that that was the scope of the decision that was made in the Bixler case, but we think that decision should still apply here. I mean, look, again, I'm no expert, I'm no attorney, I'm a layman like the rest of you here, but the scope of the decision is the essence of that decision. This looks really weak to me if I'm just being totally forthright here. The reporting continues, the court's reasoning applies with equal force here because plaintiffs no longer believe in Scientology and seek to bring claims under federal statutory law that have nothing to do with their religious beliefs, ecclesiastical doctrine, or internal Scientology matters. Compelling them to participate in a Scientology proceeding now would violate their rights in the same way it did for the plaintiffs in Bixler. Well, unfortunately, there's already many rulings on the books that says that, essentially paraphrasing, the courts are not able to even interpret or make a decision as to the fairness of forcing a former Scientologist to participate in Scientology internal arbitration. Up until now, the rulings have been crystal clear. If you are suing for something that happened while you were in Scientology, and if you signed these forms, you have to submit to internal arbitration. The only reason the Masterson plaintiffs in the civil case were allowed to move forward is because they were suing for things that happened after they left Scientology. It has been crystal clear up until this point. And the only exception that I know of when someone was suing for something that happened while they were in Scientology and the internal arbitration thing was thrown out is when the person was suing for something that happened while they were a minor in Scientology and working for Scientology. And one of the aspects of this case is that all three of these plaintiffs were minors when they were still working for Scientology, and it was my understanding that that was the ammunition they had to move forward with this case, that they were suing for labor trafficking that occurred while they were children. And I haven't seen anything so far in this response that even brings up that factor and mentions that as a reason why these arbitration agreements should not be binding. The argument seems to rest on the fact of it's just not fair. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that's just not going to work. So affidavits were submitted by each of the plaintiffs in this case and also by Mike Rinder, specifically describing the circumstances under which these forms were signed, most recently signed. In other words, as these three Sea Org members were leaving the Sea Org, they again signed these documents on their way out the door, and the affidavits describe the circumstances under which all of that occurred, the thrust of all of this being that these things were signed absolutely under duress. The problem with making that argument in lawsuits brought by former Scientologists is these forms aren't only signed once. They're signed many, many times. And one of the reasons for that is to make it next to impossible to claim that you were under duress every single time that you signed these forms. The affidavits by the plaintiffs are a little lengthy, so I'm not going to read those, but I do want to read the affidavit submitted by Mike Rinder because he was personally involved when he was still in and working for Scientology in creating these affidavits, and he speaks to the reasons these were even created in the first place. So Mike Rinder says, Sea Org members and Scientology staff are required to sign various documents designed to protect the organization from liability. OSA has the job. OSA is Office of Special Affairs. It's the division within the corporate structure of Scientology responsible for all legal matters, all legal threats, external matters. They hire all the lawyers. They hire all the private investigators. OSA is the part of Scientology that deals with harassing critics of Scientology and former Scientologists. Mike says OSA has the job of ensuring every Sea Org member has signed these releases and copies are kept on file. This is considered an important function of OSA. Sea Org members and Scientology staff are conditioned to sign documents presented to them without questioning them or even reading them. I can personally attest to that. I signed many of these documents when I was still working for Scientology, and you were never encouraged to read them. And in fact, it was considered kind of suspicious if you insisted on reading them, because why would you need to read them if signing them wasn't an option? So Mike says, it is understood that to question or refuse to sign will result in disciplinary action, including any or all of the following: being confined to the premises as a security threat, having a guard watch you 24 hours a day, being assigned to manual labor, interrogation on an e-meter, lower conditions and separation from one's spouse. Doing lower conditions are the steps required to get out of trouble. That is the best way to quickly explain that. There is a specific procedure for anyone seeking to leave the Sea Org, and it is particularly intensive for anyone who had access to the activities of David Miscavige. I oversaw these protocols as the head of OSA. Often the signing of these documents is recorded on video. These are carefully staged to make it appear the person has had an opportunity to change the document and is freely signing and is even happy to do so, Again, I can speak to that from personal experience. But the threat of not being able to leave and being punished results in many of these people signing whatever is presented to them, even provably untrue statements of self-incrimination, and claiming to be happy doing so. So, I mean, that is 100% accurate. Someone who's leaving the Sea organization, this was my experience. It was recorded. I was brought into a room, a small room, with a security guard and a camera, and the documents are put in front of you, and you are at this point where you know you've been trying to leave for months and months and months. You've finally gotten your approval, and all that is required of you in order to finally be allowed to leave is to sign these forms. Refusing to sign or hesitating to sign means you don't get to leave. So if they say, smile at the camera and tell them you're doing this of your own free will and that you're happy, and tell the camera that the reason you're leaving is because you were not capable of upholding the high ethical standards of the Sea Org, and you acknowledge that it is your fault, you will, and I did, happily say all of that to the camera. Happily! Because you're thrilled to be getting the hell out of there. So look, these arguments for why these things were signed under duress, to any normal person, these are perfectly sensible arguments. It's just that up until now, no court has given a damn about these arguments. And I personally believed that what was unique about this case is that these people were all minors. I mean, they were all minors when they went to the ship, and I thought that was the crux of the case. And I thought that was the crux of the argument for why these agreements they signed weren't going to apply. So clearly there's something else I need to understand about this case. I'm going to look into that a little more. But that is the update right now. These responses have been submitted to the court. At this point, we are waiting for the court to rule whether they are going to force these plaintiffs into Scientology arbitration, or whether they're going to throw out the arbitration agreements that were signed and allow this case to move forward. As soon as we know more, I will let you guys know. Thank you as always for watching. Reminder, there are currently 3 civil suits and 2 criminal cases. There actually might be more than that, but I need to double check all my information. At least 3 civil cases, 3 civil suits, 2 criminal cases ongoing about Scientology or high-profile Scientologists. Whenever we have updates in any of those, I'm going to share that with you, so stay tuned to this channel for that. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you to all of you who watch until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.